What would you do if your own family publicly erased you just because you were the poor one? Not ignored, not forgotten, erased. That's exactly what happened to Daniel Carter. And the moment it happened wasn't during an argument. It wasn't at a tense family dinner. It happened on a random Tuesday night, inside a group chat with 27 relatives. Daniel was sitting on the edge of his worn-out couch after a 10-hour shift at the warehouse. Steel-toe boots still on, phone buzzing in his hand. The Carter family reunion chat had just lit up with a new message. Now, normally that chat was harmless. Baby photos, holiday plans, the occasional brag about someone's new promotion. But this message was different. It came from Daniel's aunt, Linda Carter, the self-appointed referee of whom the family had made it in life. Her message read, "Family reunion this year is for people who actually made something of themselves." Then she posted a list of confirmed attendees. Doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs. Daniel scrolled slowly. Once, then again. His name wasn't there. And before he could even process it, the reaction started pouring in. Laughing emojis. From his cousins Ryan, Melissa, and Chad. One message followed. "Guess we're keeping standards high this year." Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment. He typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. Finally, he sent one quiet message. "Hope everyone has a great reunion." Then he muted the chat. No arguments. No begging. No explanations. And when reunion day arrived that Saturday, Daniel simply didn't go. But 3 days later, something strange happened. A black sedan pulled up outside his small apartment. A man stepped out holding a leather briefcase. And when Daniel opened the door, the stranger asked one question that made his stomach drop. "Are you Daniel Carter?" "Because I'm the estate lawyer for your grandfather." But to understand why that knock mattered, you have to understand what Daniel's family had been doing to him for years. Have you ever noticed how some families don't measure success by kindness, but by salary? That was the Carter family. In their world, love sounded suspiciously like a performance review. Daniel learned that early. Every reunion growing up followed the same pattern. Someone would ask about careers. Then the comparisons would start. Ryan Carter, his older cousin, was always the headline. A surgeon with a house that looked like something out of a magazine. Melissa Carter ran a tech startup and talked about funding rounds the way other people talked about weekend plans. Chad Carter flipped luxury properties and loved reminding everyone how much each one sold for. And Daniel drove a forklift at a shipping warehouse. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with business cards or investor meetings, but it paid his rent. It kept food on the table. Still, every time family gatherings rolled around, the same comments surfaced. "Still at the warehouse? You ever think about going back to school? You're too smart to stay stuck there forever." But the person who made it sting the most was Aunt Linda. Linda believed success was a scoreboard. At the last reunion, she introduced Daniel to a friend with a thin smile. "This is my nephew Daniel," she said. Then she paused. "He's still figuring things out." Everyone laughed politely. Daniel laughed too, but inside, something shifted. Because deep down, he knew something they didn't. His grandfather, Arthur Carter, never laughed at those jokes. In fact, Arthur often watched those moments very carefully. And what Daniel didn't realize yet was that his grandfather had been paying attention for years. So let me ask you something. What hurts more, being insulted privately or being laughed at by your entire family at once? Because Daniel didn't just get excluded. He got excluded publicly. The Carter family group chat had 27 members. Aunts, uncles, cousins, spouses. Basically everyone connected to the Carter name. Normally the messages were boring. Birthday reminders. Holiday plans. The occasional photo of someone's new car or vacation. But that Tuesday night, Aunt Linda sent something different. Family reunion this year is for people who actually made something of themselves. At first, Daniel thought it was a joke. Then another message appeared. A list. Title. Confirmed attendees. Ryan Carter. Melissa Carter. Chad Carter. Natalie Carter. Uncle George. The names kept going. Daniel scanned the list slowly. Once, twice, his name wasn't there. For a second, he wondered if Linda had simply forgotten him. Maybe she'd send another message correcting the mistake. But then the reaction started. Ryan dropped a laughing emoji. Melissa followed with another. Then Chad wrote something that made the message impossible to misinterpret. Guess we're keeping standards high this year. Just like that, 27 people in the chat, and not one person said, "Hey, maybe that's not okay." Daniel felt the familiar heat of embarrassment creep up his neck. He started typing. Funny joke. Delete. Wow. Didn't realize success had a guest list. Delete. Instead, he sent one short message. Hope everyone has a great time. No anger. No argument. Then he muted the chat and set the phone down. And when reunion day arrived that Saturday, Daniel didn't protest. He didn't show up. He simply went to work like it was any other day. But what Daniel didn't know was that someone very important noticed his empty seat, and that moment would quietly change the entire future of the Carter family. Here's the part no one in the Carter family expected. Daniel may not have gone to the reunion, but his absence didn't go unnoticed. The reunion that year was held at a huge lake house rented by Ryan, the kind of place with a private dock, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a kitchen bigger than Daniel's entire apartment. Exactly the kind of setting Aunt Linda loved. Everyone arrived dressed like it was a business conference disguised as a vacation. Ryan talked about a new surgical partnership. Melissa bragged about investors lining up for her startup. Chad told a long story about flipping a beachfront property for nearly double the price. On the surface, it was a perfect Carter family event. Expensive wine, carefully curated success stories, lots of polite laughter. But halfway through dinner, someone casually asked a question. Wait, where's Daniel? The table went quiet for a second. Aunt Linda waved her hand dismissively. Oh, Daniel's busy. Work. A few people chuckled. But at the end of the table sat someone who didn't laugh. Arthur Carter, the grandfather who had built the original Carter fortune decades earlier. Arthur rarely interrupted conversations anymore. Age had slowed him down, and most people assumed he simply enjoyed listening. But this time he spoke. Did Daniel get invited? The room shifted. Ryan cleared his throat. Well, we kept the guest list small this year. Arthur didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stared at the table for a moment. Then he folded his napkin, stood up slowly, and said something that confused everyone. Well, that's disappointing. And with that, he walked out of the reunion early. Most of the family assumed he was tired. What they didn't know was that later that same night, Arthur Carter called his estate attorney. And by the time the lawyer finished that meeting, the future of the entire Carter inheritance had been rewritten. 3 days after the reunion, Daniel heard a knock on his apartment door. Not a loud knock, just 2 calm taps. Daniel almost ignored it. After a long warehouse shift, the last thing he expected was a visitor. He figured it was probably a delivery driver at the wrong address. But when he opened the door, a man in a gray suit was standing there holding a leather briefcase. Professional, calm, the kind of person who looked like every minute of his day was scheduled. Good afternoon, the man said. Are you Daniel Carter? Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, who's asking? The man reached into his jacket pocket and handed him a business card. Michael Whitaker, estate attorney. Daniel's stomach tightened slightly. Estate attorney? He asked. For who? The lawyer looked at him carefully before answering. For your grandfather, Arthur Carter. Daniel blinked. My grandfather is fine. I think he is. Whitaker shook his head gently. I'm afraid your grandfather passed away 2 nights ago. The words hung in the air. Daniel felt the ground shift under him. He hadn't even known Arthur was sick. The lawyer continued. Before his passing, your grandfather updated his will, and he asked that I personally deliver a message to you. Daniel stepped aside and let the man in, still trying to process what he'd just heard. The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. This was written the night after the family reunion. Daniel frowned. The reunion I wasn't invited to? Whitaker nodded. Yes, that reunion. Daniel slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a short handwritten note from Arthur Carter, and the first sentence made Daniel's hand start to shake, because it began with 6 words he never expected to read. To the only grandson I trust. But what the letter revealed next would leave the entire Carter family in complete shock. To the only grandson I trust. Daniel read the line again, slowly, because for a second he thought he misunderstood it. His grandfather had dozens of grandchildren and relatives who were far more successful than him. Surgeons, business owners, investors, and yet the letter continued. Daniel, if you are reading this, it means you did something the rest of the family could not. Daniel's eyes moved across the page. You walked away from disrespect instead of fighting for approval. The room went silent except for the faint rustling of paper in his hands. The lawyer watched quietly as Daniel